fraud pamphlet that we have in our office. We put out every year or so. And it's got some, frankly, some very, very good tips, and it's free, available if anyone wants to use it or wants to get it from our office. We pass these out at senior citizen centers and any place else where the elderly are. And it's basically just all about elder fraud. Again, I think the biggest shock to me is just the number, when I became Attorney General, was the number of fraud complaints that we get every single day. And just always, every moment, there's someone out there trying to rip someone off. And the target population, many times, is the elderly.
Thanks. We'll take any questions you may have. Yes?
Extending the definition of abuse beyond physical abuse, does that mean that you could file charges, or what does that do to extend that definition?
For the reporters or for the definition itself?
What does that mean in terms of real-world applications? Like if now financial abuse is covered, does that mean there can be additional charges filed, or what does that accomplish by extending the definition?
There's a couple of things there. One is the expansion of mandatory reporters, and the one that the Attorney General mentioned regarding financial is perhaps the most important. This is an area now where we're starting to see, I think, a fairly significant increase in this particular type of exploitation among senior citizens. And I mentioned in testimony before the House Judiciary Committee yesterday an example from my own family. I have 3 living grandparents still. They're in their late 80s. And my maternal grandparents live not too far from me in Greater Cleveland, and received a phone call probably about a year ago from someone claiming to be their grandson and indicating that he had been in a car accident and needed several $1,000s immediately wired to an account. Now my grandmother still has very sharp mental faculties about her and was able to discern this is not in fact her grandson, me, and so was able to defray this attempt at financial exploitation. But this happens every single day, folks. That's the thing that we need to recognize. It happens a lot more in this area now than the law allows here in the state, which still focuses primarily on physical and other types of abuse. And this is perhaps the most pervasive area of expansion we're seeing in the area of exploitation here in recent years.
I totally agree. I mean, a lot of the things are already covered under the law as far as fraud. But the ability to get someone to report that to the police or report that to the Attorney General's office is so crucial. And so, to me, the mandatory reporting is a very significant part of this bill, and a very, very good one.
So explain this again. These people who are bankers and pharmacists under this bill would have a requirement to report suspicions of elder abuse, is what you're saying?
Yes, that's correct. So under the current statute, and this has been in the revised code for some time now, it's been focused primarily upon a number of other reporters. A good example would be folks who work in healthcare facilities or nursing homes. So this expands the definition and the required or mandatory reporters in the law to include those in financial institutions, for example. And we have a complete list that we can provide to you that's in House Bill 49.
But I think that the key, kind of the big picture, is our concept of abuse is changing. It is expanding from physical abuse to any kind of abuse. I mean, financial abuse. I mean, financial abuse can be just as pervasive in many sense than some forms of physical. I mean, financial abuse can be very, very tough. And so if you look at the people that have been added, a lot of them are in the area that they would know something if that person is being ripped off. And I think the philosophy behind it is this is a segment of the population that is prone to be targeted by scam artists. I mean, that statistically is absolutely true. Anecdotally, I can tell you, there's someone who's getting one of these grandparent scam calls every night in the state of Ohio. Every single night. So, again, it's out there, and it goes back to our whole concept of what abuse is.
Is there something that enforces the mandatory reporting? I mean, you'd be telling, for the first time, you'd be telling pharmacists and financial advisors, you've got to report suspicions of abuse. Is there some enforcement of that, or I mean, does somebody lose their license if they don't report? Or
I think the practical effect is every professional organization now is going to include that in their training. You know, you go get your, whatever pharmacists have to do to keep their license, and clearly someone's going to stand up and say, hey, the legislature passed a law last year. Now remember, if you know this, you have knowledge of that, not only is it your moral obligation, which has always been, now it's your legal obligation. So that's how it's going to be driven down. It's going to be driven down through every trade association, professional association that educates their members, and they're going to tell them, this is what you need to do. So a lot of it is, it builds an educational process.
And on that matter, we've done a fairly extensive job of reaching out to various trade organizations and other interested parties on this bill to make sure that we've gotten this right in the way that we're crafting the language in the law.
Who do these reports go to? Is it to the AG's office or?
Either to local law enforcement or to the AG's office, yes.
Do other states have a similar definition of financial abuse, or is Ohio the only one?
That's a good question. I don't know that they do. We can certainly take a look and see if there are other state statutes to compare against. But we recognize that this is an issue here, and through under several AGs now, the Elder Abuse Commission has kind of worked its way through how we need to strengthen these statutes. And so we've, to some extent, I think, done this based on what we found here within the state of Ohio.
You mentioned that the bill had been introduced. How close did it come to passing in the past, and what kind of issues did you address in this version?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Just to provide a little bit of historical context, I introduced House Bill 215 in the last General Assembly, which was upon the request of a constituent in my district who is the Senior Center Director in Olmsted Falls, Kathy Lowry. That was a bill that designated June 15th of each year as Elder Abuse Awareness Day. And I indicated to her at the time that we passed the bill, and that, I think it was in 2011, that for my part anyway, was going to be a down payment on addressing this issue in the state, and that we would continue working on additional legislation to strengthen adult protective services. That additional step came last summer in the form of House Bill 572 in the 129th General Assembly. That was introduced, I believe, in June. We had the Attorney General up to Olmsted Falls for the announcement of the introduction of that bill. I think it had a hearing, but it was fairly late in the session, and so to some extent we were introducing that as a placeholder in the hopes that we'd be able to do this again in session. And so we're here quite early in the 130th, and we're ready to go, and this has a bit longer track and better success as we get on the road here.
I have a question for the AG. If the